You're listening to the More Than a Worship Leader podcast. Here's your host, Gary Durbin.
Welcome to the More Than a Worship Leader podcast, where we talk about worship ministry and the local church. On this episode today is Yancy for the third time on the More Than a Worship Leader podcast. She is a worship leader, songwriter, producer of hundreds of songs that make Jesus loud. Her Dove Award-winning music is all the things kids love and everything adults value. She is a powerhouse at leading and teaching kids from birth to preteen how to worship, and creates popular worship resources for churches and homes around the world. This will be helpful for those in worship ministry and kids ministry, but I think it will also be good for any leader in the church. So, Yancy, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for coming back. You're the first three-timer.
Oh my goodness.
So
I feel like that deserves like an award or something. I don't know.
Yeah. If this podcast was big enough, I probably would be sending you a plaque or something. I don't know how that works, but
I don't know. We'll have to come up with something. I'm glad you're keeping count though.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for coming back.
Happy.
Yeah, the exciting news lately with you is the Dove Award.
Yeah.
And it's for Holy Forever, right?
Yes. So Children's Recorded Song of the Year at the Doves in 2024 for my version of Holy Forever, which is cool. I love leading that song, and it's fun watching like every age group really connect with it. And so just honored to be another person helping to carry that song, and excited that that song is getting all the attention and all the awards that it is, because I'm convinced it's the song we were made to sing. So
yeah, that's one of those, when it first came out, when Tomlin first put it out, it grabbed me and I went,
yeah.
But I'm also an older worship leader. So I was like, I don't know, so I got younger worship leaders that work with me, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I think this is a good one.
Yeah.
And we gave it some time, but after a while, we're like, yeah, this is it. This is a big song.
Yeah. Definitely. Especially anytime I am doing covers, I love it when I kind of figure that out very early in a song's life. And, when I first heard Tomlin's version, it definitely was like, this one feels special. I think this is one that we're all going to be singing. And it's, for me, I don't do covers just to say I'm doing covers. I do it for the songs that I really believe in and have blessed me, and the songs that I know I want to lead. And so, choosing to do that one was a pretty fast decision early on, knowing, hey, I want to lead this. I want to sing this with other people. So really thankful for it.
Got some big names on the co-write. I looked that up. I was like, I kind of knew, like the Johnsons are on there.
Yeah.
I didn't realize Phil Wickham co-wrote it. And then Tomlin, of course. And then my guy, man, dude, that guy. It's kind of like, I think we're at a point now where it's like, what song has he not written or co-written?
Yeah. He's been around a whole lot, and he's a pastor's kid too.
Yeah.
So I think there's something to be said for how he approaches, serving the church through music.
Yeah,
I think it stands out. Yeah.
My first exposure to him was when he formed a band called One Sonic Society. I don't know if you remember that, but I was really taken with that project. And then I got to meet him, I don't know, several years later. I was at a conference and he was just like hanging around, and I went and talked to him. But he was a great dude, just a real deal.
Yeah. It's definitely a heavy hitter, best of collaboration, no doubt.
Yeah.
I think, I heard one time, I don't remember if it was an audio interview or read it or whatever, but I guess and I don't know who all was at play, but they had been working on like the song for a while, and just like had pieces of it, but knew like they had not landed the plane, I think, especially of what the chorus was. And so I think Jen Johnson being involved was like towards that end, and like she knew where they were at one day, and then I think she's the one that probably like started the chorus. I was like, what about this? So it's interesting just to know that they were wrestling with that one. It wasn't a song that just came out in a day, but it was one that they were tweaking. And even I heard in another interview too, just about like lyrical changes that they had made. So it was in the verse, there was something where it was like, sing the song of Moses. Um, instead of sing the song of ages. And like
Ages.
they, played it for some people, and people always were kind of like hitting that like a speed bump, just kind of like, huh? Like not enough people understood. So that kind of stuff is always fascinating, but they eventually tweaked it to make it, be more universal that so many of us could connect with. So,
Yeah. And coincidentally, we're actually leading that one this Sunday.
oh,
Actually,
cool.
my wife Jenny's on the worship team this week, so she's going to lead that one. So she always rocks that one, so it's fun.
Yeah, that's
It's such
awesome.
it's just a great song. How was the Double Word experience? Like, what was that like?
It was great. So this year was way more exciting. I won another Dove back in 2021. And because that was like coming off of pandemic, world, that was a way more anticlimactic experience where there was no extra anything, literally like the pre-telecast nominees that I'm part of, where it's just a video that played. Absolutely nothing happened whatsoever. You just watched the video and kept sitting in your chair the whole time. So this year was way more fun because once they announced, even though it was still presented via video, I think you can pull that up and watch that video on YouTube now. But once they announced the nominees and the winner, then you actually got to go forward to the stage, go up on stage and take your photo with one of the Dove trophies, and then go upstairs to the media room and do a little photo shoot and even do an acceptance speech on video. So yeah, so it was way more fun and so sweet. Like Brian and Jen Johnson were in there, and they were like one section over from me. So she was kind of like watching, during my category being announced. And then when I hopped up, like she grabbed me and like wanted a photo. So if you've seen the photo of me, Brian, and Jen on my Instagram posts or whatever, Jen actually requested that photo, and it was taken on her phone by my husband. And so it was fun to have them right there being excited about the win too. So
Well, that's fantastic. Hey,
yeah,
congratulations for
thank
getting
you.
that award, and happy to see that happen to you and for you, and
Yeah,
uh
thank
just
you.
a great song and a great version for sure. So very cool.
I appreciate it.
Well, I'm also excited about your new adventure, which is your new podcast, Stained Glass. I'm gonna say that again. Your
Yeah.
new podcast called Stained Glass Kids. Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So I started a podcast. It is called Stained Glass Kids. And the idea is, well, I guess I can share more in depth in a second, but in general, it's for PKs and ministry kids, but also I really want pastors, maybe executive pastors, some people in some other roles in leadership in churches listening to it as well. And if I just kind of rewind and go back in time, so for the last several years, I mean, maybe as many as five for sure, like the last 4 years, I just have been burdened for PKs. And it was kind of one of those things where it was like, I knew, I knew God was highlighting this group of people to me, but like that's as much as I knew. It was like maybe I wrote a couple social media posts about it here or there, asked some ministry friends, just about their family, and kind of made a list of some different families I could pray for that were in ministry. But it was a situation where I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with this. Like, I don't know what it looks like in my ministry context. Like I didn't necessarily feel like I'm ready to just go do breakouts about this at a conference. Like I grew up a ministry kid for sure, but it's not like I know these are the 10 points I want to make about what's not working and how to fix it. And so just kind of have been wrestling with that and sitting with it the last few years, and was actually on a panel all about ministry families at a conference back in January. And somewhere that week, probably shortly after having been on that panel, I had this random thought, and I just was like, there should be a podcast where we talk about some things that we don't normally talk about in ministry, because I've been a PK, I've been a ministry kid my whole life, and in many ways, some of my hardest years of walking that out have actually even been as an adult. Just realized there hasn't really been a place for us to just talk about some of the things that we have to walk through, and experience as ministry, kids. And so I had this meeting back in May with someone, and told them about that random thought that I had of, hey, there should be a podcast where we talk about things we don't normally talk about in ministry. And he was kind of like, sign me up for that. Like, let's make that happen. And my dad was actually in the meeting that day, and he kind of brought back up, and he said, well, you've been really like burdened for pastors' kids. And it was like when I kind of mixed those two concepts together and realized as well that it's not necessarily me coming up and creating all the answers, but it's me having conversations with people that have had to walk this out and live this out and just talk about, the good, the bad, and the ugly of what they've seen their parents have to walk through. I realized, I was like, okay, this is something that makes sense to me. And so just kind of walked it out and prayed about it. At the same time, I was really emotional that week. And I kind of knew, I was like, I think if I'm this emotional about the possibility, that pretty much is a telltale sign to me that this is God, kind of putting on a silver platter an opportunity for me to move forward and just step forward in obedience. And so, yeah, so just kind of went to work, planning and thinking about it and creating what it might be. And so each episode, I'm interviewing a PK, a ministry kid. Some people limit that title of PK to only a senior pastor's kid. But my dad has always been in an associate, role. He's been executive pastors and overhaul departments and high up in the food chain, but he's never been a senior pastor. But I've always considered myself to be a PK. And I know that there's so many kids that have a parent that oversees an area of ministry in a church, and they feel that burden, they feel those sets of eyes, like all the things. And so definitely including them into the mix. I've had some requests to people tell me don't forget about missionary kids. So I know we'll work some of those stories in, but just sitting down and having an honest conversation and them sharing their story. And, sometimes they're going to be healed, redeemed, worked out stories. And the plan as well is to talk to some people that have walked away and aren't living for the Lord currently. And so long term, the plan is to have those conversations as well, just about what they saw and what they experienced and maybe what pushed them out. And I really believe this is going to be something very healing for a lot of people, and just an opportunity to hear maybe a little bit of your own life story where you recognize and resonate with that in someone else. And maybe in some cases, it'd be encouraging that someone else's story is 10 times worse than yours.
Yeah.
It might as well make you feel a little bit better. But yeah, I mean, this is just my huge step of faith I can scratch my head on one hand and go, how does this make sense? But in the context of just what I do in ministry, like specifically with making music for kids and leading worship and all of that. But I realized when they were the guys that I'm working with, they were like, yeah, you need to, come up with kind of your little bio, like what you've done, how you arrived here. And honestly, it was a pretty humbling moment for me of just processing and realizing, okay, like before the music, before before my calling into ministry or before even my own salvation story, the thing that I've always been since I took my first breath on planet Earth was a PK and a ministry kid. And realizing in so many ways, my entire life has been preparing me for this moment to have these conversations. And it's just really exciting.
I love that. I love the idea of not forgetting that part of people's lives. It's amazing how many times I have bumped into people, even at my church right now and churches past, and had no idea that their parents were in ministry
Mhm.
until they told me. Because
Yeah.
you don't walk around with a badge saying that,
Yeah.
but it's part of their life. So, and it's definitely part of mine. I was a ministry kid my entire life.
Mhm.
So it's cool. I definitely feel seen with it with the podcasts, and I appreciate it. And then the fact that you mentioned there are those who have walked away from the faith, and I think they will feel seen as well, which
Mhm.
they can be lost and forgotten by the
Yeah.
church and not heard or seen. So I love that.
Yeah. I mean, something I really realized in the process of getting started, recording the interviews, I think, these last few years that I've spent where it really felt like God had a highlighter, to me, it was just kind of like, take notice, like showing me this category and this group of people. And, we often hear that phrase, break my heart for what breaks yours. And I realized for me, this was a situation of God breaking my heart, making me be aware, going like, why does every single ministry conference not have breakouts on this topic and this subject? Because I mean, unless you're single and don't have kids, it applies to everybody there at the conference that they're raising a family in ministry and what that looks like. And just realize, in many cases, like what that's looked like and how that's been operating has some dysfunction to it. It's not always the healthiest situation. And I really feel like, God just burdening me with this group of people these last few years was a situation where he was breaking my heart for what breaks yours. And I think he's saying this is not okay. And, sometimes this group is forgotten about or they are expected to walk something out in an unfair way. And I just am honored that I get to be the one to sit down and have these conversations. So,
Yeah. And you and I are both parents of ministry kids as well. So
yeah,
this is I love the fact that it's going to be a blessing for those who are listening who have been ministry kids. I think
yeah,
it, and like you're kind of getting at there, I think it's going to be a blessing and maybe even an equipping tool for those of us who are in ministry to go, hey, don't forget, you have ministry kids too.
right.
So when you think about advice, when you think about, man, not where you are in the process with this, and you're talking to, maybe you're at a conference, you're talking to church leaders, worship leaders who are raising kids in ministry. What's like the one or two things that really stand out right now?
Yeah. I mean, I lost count because I recorded several interviews this week. So I'm somewhere between like 12 and 15 interviews that I've done. I think it's closer to the 15 mark. But something that is definitely I'm hearing several times over um, is just the glass house concept and what the set of eyes and the expectations for ministry families to live up to unfair
Yeah.
expectations,
Yeah.
and what that looked like for those kids in those situations where, like, okay, what actually goes on in their house versus what they have to project publicly
Mm.
when they show up and walk through the doors are two different things.
Mm.
Or, what dad looks like or says, or what his attitude is when he's on stage in the pulpit, and then what dad is like in their living room are two different things.
Mm.
And I definitely am hearing just about how jarring and how not okay that is. And I'm hearing that multiple times over.
Mm.
And another thing that I've heard several times is coming from oldest kids, and I think this is just an oldest kid thing. I don't necessarily think it's things we do wrong, people have done wrong, but I think it's important to maybe be aware of it, is that oldest kid is always going to feel the need to carry more weight than even maybe what you're asking them to. But their antennas are up and they're aware that something is stressful or something's going on with a parent, the grandparent, like whoever it might be. And they take a lot more on themselves, feeling the need to, like, usher that along, even if no one asked them to. But I think thinking of those firstborns, that would be an amazing filter, an amazing thing to be aware of, and know that maybe there's some extra check-ins you need to have with those firstborn kids, or just be aware that they might be carrying the weight of some situations that you're walking through in ways that you're not expecting. And they'll never utter a single word about it,
Right.
until they get way later in life. But that is definitely, I'm hearing that several times over as well. So
Mm.
I'm finding that intriguing as a
Yeah.
firstborn myself.
Yeah,
So,
me too. Me too. Yeah, I get it. I get it.
yeah.
So the podcast, you said you've recorded several already. They'll be coming
Yeah.
out.
Yeah.
What's the frequency of those? How often are you going to put those out?
Yeah, the plan is every single week. So every single week from this day forward, right now, there's a plan to release a new interview, sharing someone's story. And I really feel like this is an opportunity. Like, yes, I do want PKs to feel seen and heard and just kind of find their tribe, find their people. But I really do want pastors and executive pastors and people in leadership listening, because I feel like it's an opportunity to learn and grow. And maybe it means you make some modifications into how you care for your staff and your team and their families, how you check in and look after your own families. I think this is going to be one of the greatest case studies that's ever been done
Mm.
of just how these people have been affected, and what they've walked through and what they've carried over the years. And so I really think that there's so much potential to build a healthier, stronger church
Mm.
because of these conversations.
Mm. Yeah, Stained Glass Kids sounds like a good book title too.
Yeah.
So you never know what's going to happen with that.
You never know. You never know. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Yancy, thank you so much for following the call of God on your life with that. I think that's going to be a blessing for a lot of people.
Yeah.
To our listeners who are listening to this, I really want to encourage you to go check that out on all the podcast platforms. It's called Stained Glass Kids by Yancy. It'll bless you, it'll equip you, and I think it'll be helpful for the kingdom and the local church. So thanks again, Yancy, for coming on the podcast once again,
Yes.
and for all the many resources that you put out, including this new podcast. We're very excited about it.
Yes, thank you so much for helping me spread the word.
Thanks for listening to this episode. Please add this to your podcast list, review it, and share it with others. And don't forget about Gary's books, More Than a Worship Leader and More Than a Band, available on Amazon today.